So about 4 weeks ago, I upgraded from my trusty GH4 to the new GH5S. Was it a wise investment? Probably not, but I am still happy with the purchase. Here, let me tell you why. First off, I suppose a bit of background is in order. I am a long-time GH4 user, so I've loved the camera. I think for the money, the GH4 was and probably still is one of the best value video cameras on the market. It's got stacks of great features, more than most people would ever need, in fact more than I would ever need. Starting off with amazing video quality. It's got fantastic battery life, there's tons of affordable accessories now, especially since it's been out for so long. And with the potential to use pretty much any lens system on the market, it really is the perfect beginner's camera. Basically, you get to play with everything that you'd ever need in filmmaking, which does kind of beg the question is why did I upgrade again? Well, I upgraded for two main issues. Well, three actually, if you count my unhealthy obsession with wasting money on new camera gear. But the first main issue with the GH4 is shitty low light performance. I think most people agree that this camera is pretty terrible unless you get great lighting conditions. And the second thing is a very limited recording codec, which means that in post-production or editing for us amateurs, I'd often struggle to get the look that I wanted, because if you tried and pushed the color grade, or if I messed up the settings in camera and wanted to try and rescue a clip, which happens a lot in my instance, I'd get some fairly major issues with the image. Now, having said that, I have seen a lot more skilled filmmakers than myself get phenomenal results with the GH4. They're clearly just a lot more talented than I am. So with those great things said about the GH4, why is it that I could be happy with upgrading to the GH5S? Well, first and least importantly, the GH5S does feel a lot nicer than the GH4. So the GH4 is definitely a smaller camera. And you can tell when you're holding the two cameras that the GH5S just has a lot more going on. It's a bigger body, it's heavier, and in general it just feels much more substantial. I kind of like it, I like it a lot. It feels much more premium than the GH4. They've improved how tactile the camera is. The buttons are just a lot more clicky, the knobs are a lot more knobby, and especially this rear dial. The rear dial on the GH4 is horrendous, really vague, you didn't know what you were pressing and mixing up buttons. The GH5S is just a lot more positive and clunky, so you can tell what's going on. They have added this joystick thing, which I'm not quite sure why. I've seen a lot of other users saying that the joystick's great, but with me, because I'm coming from the GH4, I'm just kind of navigating around the GH5S in the same way that I would with the GH4, just kind of naturally going through all the menus. So I'm not using the joystick at all. So I could definitely live without the joystick. The LCD displays, I can't really tell the difference between the display on the GH5S and the GH4. They're very, very similar. They're okay, it's not amazing, it's not super bright. It's definitely a better display than what I'm seeing on the A7 III, which I'm borrowing at the moment to shoot this on. Review coming on that soon. However, back to the GH5 and the GH4, I still find it quite easy to miss focus points if you're manually focusing just using the LCD displays. The focus peaking on this camera, on the GH5S, is not as bright or defined as the GH4 either, so it can be difficult in tricky lighting conditions to find out what's in focus and what's not. It's definitely easier to use the viewfinder. The viewfinder on the GH5S is significantly better than the GH4. It's much larger and much clearer. The other things to note about the body on the GH5S are these new kind of flappy doors that they've got, and also a much more robust SD card holding slot. Neither of those were really an issue on the GH4. These are better, but again, it's not a major upgrade, I don't think. While we're talking about SD cards, the dual SD card slot is a really, really nice feature on the GH5S. However, I'm not using it how I would like to use it. I've got one SD card for images and another SD card for video. The one that I'm using for images is pretty pointless because, in all fairness, you're not going to be shooting still images with the GH5S, they're not great. The reason that I'm using one for images at the moment is that I simply can't afford another fast card so that I can run video on both of the SD card slots. That's one of the things that I missed when I ordered the GH5S. to shoot the 400 megabits per second codec, the maximum quality out of the GH5S, you're going to need a really fast UHS-2 card, and I didn't budget for that. So when this thing turned up and I found out that I couldn't use my GH4 SD cards, well, I was pretty pissed, in all fairness. After a load of searching online and experimenting with various SD cards from Amazon, I found that the cheapest card that would work with the GH5S is this Sony 128GB UHS-2 card, Extreme Pro, I think that they call it. It's about £100 on Amazon. It's cheaper than anything else that I've found out there, and it's not failed once. So I tried quite a few other options, and they would only record for about 14 seconds before the camera would stop and say that there was not enough write speed for them to work. And the bonus that this is about £50 cheaper than anything else means that I would definitely recommend it. I've not seen other YouTubers recommending this SD card, so I'll leave a link for it down in the description. So I think we all know that the major selling feature for the GH5S is the crazy low light dual native ISO sensor thing that it's got going on. And I've got to say that it is killer. It lives up to the hype. I'm loving the image that's coming out of the GH5S. It is significantly better than anything I could get on the GH4 in pretty much any condition. The thing just works. It's killer. I think I said killer. Yeah, it's good. I struggled a lot with the GH4 in anything but perfect lighting conditions. Now that's probably more of a reflection of my own shooting skills than the GH4's shortcomings, but still, I'm finding using the GH5S I'm getting a lot more usable shots. The 10-bit 422 codec is holding so much data compared to what the GH4 had, so when I do mess up with exposures and white balances and all that kind of stuff, I am able to recover a lot of the shots in post-production. Also, the benefit with this is that I can shoot up to around 10,000 ISO and still get super clean images on the GH5S. Now when you couple that with the Metabone speed booster and the Sigma 18-35, and if I run the Sigma at the wide open at f1.2, I mean this thing, it literally sees better than I can. I'm going to include right here a couple of night shots that I just did. These were shot at ISO 6400, so I didn't even need to get up to the 10,000. Slow motion is another awesome feature. I'm finding that 120 frames per second is the sweet spot on the 5S. I've tried 180 and I've tried 240, but both of those appear to be a little soft unless you're working in perfect lighting conditions, whereas the 120 seems to be usable in pretty much any conditions. There's really no comparison between the slow motion on the 5S and what was on the GH4. The GH4 maxed out at 96 frames per second, but the footage, in all fairness, looked terrible. The maximum I shot was 60 frames per second on the GH4, which just never really gets you that sexy Peter McKinnon style B-roll that seems to be in fashion now. So the GH5S is head and shoulders above in the slow motion department. When you're doing a direct comparison between the two, the GH5S is just essentially better in every single way. The question really comes down to actually if I'm good enough to utilize that improvement, because ultimately I still feel that I'm nowhere near skilled enough to max out what the GH4 can offer. So for the money that I just spent on the 5S, it kind of begs the question, would I have been better off actually just taking a couple of weeks off work, buying a nice external recorder like an Atomos Ninja or something like that to improve the codec, and then just spending every day practicing? The end result would probably have made a bigger improvement in my actual productions. However, I wouldn't have a shiny new camera to play with, would I? So, like I said, it's probably not the wisest investment I've ever made. However, I am still very, very happy with the purchase, and it's given me a new lease of life to shoot more videos and get out there and do more practicing. So I hope any of you that have been looking at the GH5S, considering it, and any users that are coming from a GH4 specifically up to the 5S found this useful. If you did so, please leave a thumbs up, and if you've got any questions, just leave them in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them as quickly as I can. That wraps up this one. Like, subscribe, leave a comment, anything else that you want, and I'll see you on the next one. It's always really difficult to end YouTube videos. I need to pay more attention to what other guys are doing, because I always feel like I'm just kind of cutting them off short.